Ollie adjusted the microphone, looked at the reporters, and blurted out, "I'm the greatest of all time." It wasn't a casual remark. It was a psychological blow, delivered with the same precision as his punches. The entire room held its breath. Some laughed, others snorted, but everyone knew he had captured their attention, and this was the first round. Muhammad Ali didn't wait for the ring to fight. His stage could have been a press conference table, a hotel hallway, or the entrance to a gymnasium. Always standing, chest out, voice firm, he spoke in rhyme, in improvised verses that sounded like street music. "I float like a butterfly, I sting like a bee," he shouted before the cameras, with a conviction that passed through television sets and reached the homes of millions. And most impressively, every word rang true. He knew he was messing with his opponent even before the first punch. Sonny Liston, the undefeated champion, trembled with rage at the taunts. "He doesn't deserve to be in the ring with me," Liston would say. Ollie would respond in rhyme, as if it were a rap battle long before rap existed. "Liston is ugly. Liston is slow. I'll have him on the floor in less than a moment." Journalists scrambled to write them down, knowing those lines would make headlines. But there was more to it than provocation. Ollie turned his interviews into a spectacle. His voice became a weapon, and the audience loved it. It wasn't just boxing. It was entertainment. It was poetry. It was a challenge. At each press conference, he seemed bolder. He stared down reporters and said things no one else dared to say. "I'm handsome, I'm fast, I'm dangerous. No man can match me." And it wasn't empty arrogance. It was a calculated act, a performance rehearsed and repeated until it became second nature. He understood that the world wanted more than a fight. The audience wanted to feel, they wanted excitement, they wanted a spectacle, and Ollie delivered it with his words. "If you even dream of beating me, you better wake up and apologize." It was impossible not to laugh, not to be impressed, not to feel the impact. Amidst this verbal spectacle, there was also a man aware of the power of his voice. Beyond sport, in times of racism, injustice, and war, Ollie used the same energy to confront not only rivals, but also governments and systems. When he refused to fight in Vietnam, he spoke with the same firm tone. "No Viet Cong ever called me nigger." The phrase crossed borders. It was an interview, but it sounded like a historic speech. The whole world listened. His words divided opinions, but they never went unnoticed. Ollie spoke as if he knew he was writing his own legend. His rivals tried to respond, but lost the wordplay. George Foreman recalled, "Before the fight, he made me nervous with just his mouth every time he spoke. I felt like I was losing," and it was true. The microphone was his secret weapon. Every press conference was a mental war. Every sentence an invisible punch. Journalists realized that interviewing Ollie was more than just gathering statements. It was witnessing a show no one wanted to miss. He knew this and exploited every second. While other fighters limited themselves to talking about training and strategies, Ollie constructed narratives. "I'm not the champion of the world. I'm the people's champion," he shouted, and the audience believed him. Crowds began to follow him not only for his victories in the ring, but for his courage to speak out. For those who had no voice, Ali became an echo. For those who feared, he was courage. For those who doubted, he was proof that confidence could overcome destiny. His verses, simple and direct, spanned generations. "I am the greatest," ceased to be a phrase and became an identity. He was a fighter who didn't need a bell to start a fight. A microphone was enough. And that's how Ollie turned press conferences into a battlefield. There was no referee to control the words, no bell to end the provocations. He dominated the space, the pace, the audience, and his rivals knew it. Even before the first round, they were at a disadvantage. Ollie used the microphone as a sword, the words as a shield, the rhyme as a knockout punch. And, that night against Liston, he made it clear that the fight had begun long before they stepped into the ring. The audience understood. The boxer wasn't just building a career, he was shaping an era. His phrases ran through newspapers, echoed on radios, and blared across television screens. Young people repeated his rhymes on the streets. Critics tried to decipher his style. He didn't just speak to provoke, he spoke to make a mark. Every word was tattooed into the collective memory. Ollie didn't need to win with punches alone. His mouth was as feared as his fists. At the end of that press conference, with the journalists still in shock, Ollie left smiling. He seemed to know he had already won half the fight. While Liston carried his anger, Ollie carried the audience. And in that detail lay the difference. Because, for him, winning wasn't just about defeating your opponent, it was about dominating minds. It was about controlling narratives. It was about making the whole world repeat what he said. And that night, as he left the room, he murmured, "Write this down, I'm going to change the game," and it changed. This was just the first round outside the ring. But the next chapter would show how every interview, every sentence, every improvised word would become a surefire blow against the greatest rivals of his career. Ollie discovered that the microphone could cut deeper than any punch. What no one knew was that those words, spoken on camera, were part of a much larger plan. Ollie didn't just want to win fights, he wanted to win history. And in the next chapter we'll see how his words began to topple giants before they even stepped into the ring. "Liston will fall in the 8th, shouted Ollie before the cameras, as if he were a prophet predicting the future. It wasn't just provocation, it was a psychological blow that penetrated his opponent's mind even before the bell rang. Sonny Liston, accustomed to instilling fear with his gaze, found himself dismantled before a man who feared nothing. Ollie knew his words were invisible spears. The more he spoke, the more Liston carried the weight of expectation. The newspapers printed the phrases the next day, and even the bettors began to believe the impossible could happen. Ollie turned interviews into preliminary rounds. He anticipated the ring. He created the fight before the fight. The scene was repeated against George Foreman in 1974. In the legendary Rumble in the Jungle, Foreman was the monster, the man who had demolished Joe Frazier and Ken Norton with devastating punches. No one believed Ollie could resist, but he knew victory began with his mouth. "Foreman is slow, Foreman is predictable, Foreman can't beat me," he would say. His voice echoed through radio, newspapers, and television, and the crowd in Zaire chanted his name, Ollie Boma, the Ollie kill him. The crowd was mesmerized, not only by the fight, but by the speech. Foreman, accustomed to the silence of submissive rivals, found himself surrounded by a crowd spellbound by Ali's poetry. Ali didn't just speak to defeat opponents, he spoke to defeat time. Each phrase was crafted to last. "I am the greatest," he repeated. It wasn't enough to say it once, it had to be engraved in the collective imagination, and it did. His verses were short, direct, and easy to memorize. They became slogans, anthems, and weapons. Boxing had never seen anything like them. Reporters tried to coax catchphrases from other fighters, but none could. Ollie was unique. His mind created in seconds what others could never achieve in years. But behind the spectacle lay an internal struggle. Ali carried the weight of being a black Muslim man in a country divided by racism and war. Every time he took the microphone, he knew he wasn't speaking solely for himself. "I don't have to go fight in Vietnam for white men who oppress black people here," he said. The statement hit like a bombshell. They stripped him of his title, tried to silence him, but the word had already spread. Ollie proved that his voice was indestructible. Even without a belt, he was still the people's champion. His opponents tried to counterattack. Joe Frazier, for example, tried to respond to the provocations before the fight of the century in 1971, but Ollie gave him no space. He called him a guerrilla, a tool of the system, and turned the duel into a personal drama. Frazier, who was supposed to be merely a sporting rival, became a symbol of resistance to Ollie's brilliance. The tension was so great that the fight didn't begin in Madison Square Garden, but in the headlines, in interviews, in Ollie's sharp speeches. The ring only confirmed what the verbal war had already built. The impact of his voice wasn't limited to rivals. Children repeated his phrases in the streets. Ordinary men felt represented. When Ollie said, "I am beautiful, I am the greatest, I am invincible," it was as if he challenged the world to believe in itself. The audience didn't see arrogance, they saw courage, they saw the chance to be more. Ollie had discovered the secret of communication, transforming self-confidence into spectacle. He spoke to intimidate, but also to inspire. And that's why his voice was never just his. It was a collective echo. George Foreman, years after his defeat, confessed, "He beat me before the bell. When I realized it, I was already defeated, not by the punches, but by the weight of the words that surrounded me." This confession explains Ali's power. He didn't expect physical combat. He built, brick by brick, a fortress of words where only he had control. His opponent, upon entering the ring, already felt like a stranger, already felt small, and the audience, already decided, cheered for the one who had dominated the narrative. Ollie. The microphone in his hands was more than an object. It was a sword, and each press conference, more than a meeting with the press, was a battle. If his rivals needed to train physically, Ollie trained mentally. He studied how to use quick, rhyming, impactful sentences. He knew that repeated words became reality. and he made them his greatest weapons. In the end, what most frightened his opponents wasn't his swift punch, but his confident smile as he spoke, because, by smiling, Ollie was telling the world, I've already won. You're just going to watch the spectacle of my victory. And this certainty, expressed in words, penetrated deeper than any blow. However, Ali's greatest battle wasn't against Liston, Foreman, or Frazier. It was against an invisible enemy, an adversary that not even his sharpest verses could avoid, political persecution and the attempt to silence him. The next chapter shows how his voice became so dangerous that entire governments tried to silence him, but failed. If this story has already captivated you so far, imagine what's to come. So leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell, because in the next chapters you'll discover how Ali's voice became such a powerful weapon that not even the government could take it down. Ali stopped a step away from the painted line on the floor of the draft board and said, without trembling, "My name is Muhammad Ali, I will not go." Silence split the room. The officer repeated the command. The cameras zoomed in. The flashes seared his eyes. Casus, Marcellus, Clay. He lifted his chin. That is not my name. They repeated the order. Ollie kept his feet glued to the ground, as if that white line were a ring he refused to cross. There was no paying audience, no gloves, just the cold microphone, the letterhead, and a world waiting for him to bow. He didn't bow. My conscience doesn't sell tickets, he said, low but audible. Within minutes, the public verdict, traitor to some, hero to others. Within hours, the sporting verdict, belt removed, license cancelled, schedule empty. But what seemed like defeat was, in fact, the opening of his longest fight, the fight to keep speaking when they wanted him to shut up. Without a ring, Ollie found another stage, packed university auditoriums, churches, union halls, street corners. He would step up, adjust the microphone, and unleash verses like someone sharpening a blade. No Viet Cong ever called me nigger. The phrase rang out on radio, stations, newspapers, and dining rooms. Students asked, why risk it all? He would reply, because faith without action is just a dead word. It wasn't a polished speech. It was body, sweat, and conviction. The government watched him. Dossiers grew. Anonymous phone calls threatened. Still, Ollie performed night after night, transforming pain into rhyme, censure into headlines, loss into narrative. Without a fight purse, the bills tightened. Without a belt, the world tested his mettle. But before the microphone, he seemed larger. They took my work. They didn't take my voice, he would say, and the audience, with clenched fists, would respond. Ollie, Ollie. It was bare-knuckle boxing. Every sentence a straight punch to the jaw of injustice. In the courts, the fight was different. Appeals, resources, back and forth. He arrived there in a dark suit, but he fought with the same cadence. Short sentences, fixed eyes, steady breathing. When the sentence weighed heavily on his shoulders, he looked at the press and rhymed bitterly. You can take my title, but you can't take my destiny. His exile from the ring seemed endless. He trained in empty gyms, punching the bag as if knocking on the door of the future. In the mirror, he repeated mantras. I lost money, but I didn't lose my name. At home, his family asked how long. In the streets, children imitated his steps, not with his jab, but with his words. He endured the hunger for audiences and the hunger of his soul, holding the microphone like a rosary. There he transformed interviews into worship, conferences into rings, his own biography into a poem of resistance. What was supposed to be oblivion became daily memory. What was supposed to be silence became a refrain. When the wind began to change, it wasn't with fireworks, but with a timid announcement, a license granted, a date, a city that would welcome him back. Even before returning to the ropes, Ollie asked for a microphone. He spoke of loss, faith, and return, not as a martyr, but as a man. They made an example of me. I will be a lesson, he said, facing the camera as if facing the judge. On the other side, former critics admitted he hadn't broken. On this side, the people who never abandoned him hurried to see him again, but the return wouldn't be simple. His body held memories of the war that never happened. His mind bore the scars of invisible battles. Still, Ali smiled like someone spotting the missing bell. The plan was clear. Take back what they had taken with fists and words. The first gong was approaching, and the microphone, once again, would be his shield. In the Zaire Stadium, the heat clung to the skin and the chant exploded. Ollie, Bome. He raised the microphone before open training and aimed at the camera. As if aiming at a chin, Foreman will feel the weight of time. It wasn't bravado, it was construction. Ali dictated the script, marking pauses like jabs, accelerating like combinations. Angelo Dundee whispered, "Save your leg, save your breath." He replied without looking, "I keep quiet when I want to. Today, the voice is the blow." Each sentence sowed doubt in Foreman's camp. The journalists took notes, the crowd responded, and the opponent saw the ring narrow before the fight began. The microphone did the dirty work, weakening, exposing, turning the clock against the most feared fist on the planet. Ali taunted, "Logs fall when the wind blows. Today I will be the wind." The camera closed in on the sweat and he declared, "Move with faith, he with fear." The chant grew. Children imitated the guard. Foreman listened from afar, impassively, but the team noticed cracks whisper. On fight day, he walked to the ring as if returning to an altar, hearing the stadium chant his name. Before the bell, he leaned into the announcer's microphone and delivered a half-rhyme. "I don't run from danger, I invite it." When the bell rang, he began the reverse dance, arms raised, back on the rope, eyes alert. There, a game of resistance was born that seemed suicidal, receiving, breathing, deflating the hurricane. "Hit, Big George," he murmured in the clinch, his voice hot in his rival's ear. Foreman unloaded, the crowd roared, and Ali silently counted heartbeats. Each short dodge was a verse. Each tie, a comma that delayed the paragraph of the knockout. Between rounds, he didn't demand air, he demanded attention. "Look closely, the weather is turning corners." On the other side, the champion breathed heavily, as if each minute were worth a bag of cement. There he leaned against the rope again and made the suffering a slow-motion script and waited in the eighth. The clock became his ally. Foreman came in heavy, his punch lost angle, his torso swayed. Ali read the pause like a comma and fired. Jab, right, cross to the blind spot. The giant faltered, the stadium held its breath, and the rope returned the sway to the champion's body. Ali took a step forward, unhurriedly, and put the final point. Left, clean right, takedown. The roar exploded. The world saw the improbable. The referee counted. Foreman groped for ground and found silence. Ali walked to his corner like an actor who already knows the outcome, but before sitting down, he raised his voice without a microphone. "I said so." The stadium repeated, "He said so." When the bell died, the cameras surrounded him. A reporter asked, "How did you win?" He put his mouth to the microphone and replied in verse, "I let the storm tire you. I stole your breath. I gave you the mirror. In the end, time punched for me." The crowd beat the rhythm on the metal plates, and Ali, sweating, seemed lighter than air. In the locker room, the microphone returned to the hands of those who treated it like a talisman. They asked if it was the same Ali from before his exile. He tilted his head and effortlessly rhymed, "I'm the one who stood when they pushed, the one who speaks when they try to silence me." It wasn't self-promotion, it was a story. The victory against Foreman sealed more than a belt. It proved that a voice can also knock you out. At the press conference, he alternated playfulness and gravity. He imitated his rival, drew laughter, and, in a second, delivered the political sting. "If you doubted me, look at the people." The chorus from the streets invaded the room. Ali thanked them one by one, called reporters by name, and delivered another short rhyme. "The greatest don't forget to listen." Then, in a brief silence, he stared into the camera. "I don't fight just for myself." The phrase crossed television screens and went to sleep with millions. Before leaving, he touched the amulet microphone and whispered, "As long as anyone listens, I will fight with words." The city became a ring. He crossed the crowd, and then the silence began to tremble within. The flame rose as his hand trembled, and the world saw Muhammad Ali lit the Atlanta cauldron. There was no bell, no judge, only the silence of millions holding their breath. The microphone beside him hardly mattered. The image spoke for him. Ali stared at the flame as if discovering his own history burning above the stadium. His body wavered in the details, but his will remained intact. That gesture was a wordless press conference. It said that defeats don't define destinies, that time can wound, but also crown. Journalists wept, children applauded, former rivals bowed their heads. Ali didn't need to rhyme with life. The message pierced screens. The voice that once struck now protected. The fire recorded the verdict, still the greatest, because he still spoke standing even without uttering a syllable. In that instant, every tremor became a human legend, every spark became a memory. Those who doubted understood, the force that knocks down is less than the force that lifts. Enlightenment and respect. After the flame came small rooms, noisy gymnasiums, hospital corridors. There, he listened more than he spoke, and when he took the microphone, his voice carried a new weight. It was no longer the blade that cuts the adversary. It was the hand that pulls those left behind. Serving others is the rent you pay for your stay on earth, he would say, and the audience breathed in unison. He repeated names, thanked volunteers, called for education, called for dignity. In prisons, he reminded young people that courage isn't born of anger but of choice. In churches, he reminded them that faith without care turns to stone. Between each sentence, the silence worked in his favor. The tremor betrayed the body, serenity betrayed the soul. Reporters asked about glory, and he returned questions about service. The world heard my punches. Now hear my responsibility. He would summarize, combining biography with the streets. People left with a simple certainty: the highest victory is the one that achieves the other. He was living proof, humble and firm. For more, over time, former rivals became bridges. Foreman admired him in public. Frazier, even wounded by old provocations, received hugs and apologies. There he understood that the microphone could mend what had once wounded him. In late interviews he held the device carefully, like someone holding an old photograph. I learned to lose without losing my dignity. He spoke of regrets, of limits, of humanity. When children asked for advice, he would return it in a simple rhyme: train the body, protect the heart, and choose kindness as your guardian. His words no longer sought to make headlines, they sought to conquer cynicism. There, he sat in the front row at community events, smiling slowly, greeting slowly. If before he had taught how to intimidate giants, now he taught how to be great without stepping on anyone. Each speech was a map for growing without hardening. And, with each microphone he touched, he seemed to say, fame fades, the impact remains, and impact is what reaches those who have no voice. Legacy is daily action. In the end, Ollie's story shows that the voice can fight when the body no longer runs. He used verses like one wearing gloves, to attack injustices, to defend values, to embrace the wounded. In his glory days, the microphone paved the way for victory. In his difficult days it became a crutch of dignity. Some call it marketing, others call it myth. The record is simple. He spoke, and something moved, in the ring and in the streets. And that's the point. Technique wins fights, narrative wins eras. When he said, I am the greatest, he taught a grammar of courage. When he said, no Viet Cong, he taught an ethics of presence. The sum of the rounds is not a score, it's an invitation. May each person find their microphone a gesture, a text, a listening ear, and use it to lift those who remained down. Because the world still needs voices that hit where punches fail, in the heart. If one day there is no applause, let there be respect. If there is no cameras, let there be purpose. Use your voice and stand up, today.